Hello, I am Samantha Schreiber, and I'm here with my grandma, Rain Shyman, and today we are going to talk about how society has changed through time and the way that we interact with the natural environment. So, let's begin by you telling me your experience and how you and your family interacted with the environment during your childhood in the 40s and 50s.
Well, okay. First of all, the 40s and 50s um, were a really good remembrance for me as far as family life. And my parents tell me they had gone through the Great Depression, and also World War II was over. My father was in the service, so my mom was happy to have him home, and they started a family, and life was pretty good. We really weren't worried at that time, at least any that I can remember, about the environment. We enjoyed it. We loved going for Sunday drives. I was fortunate enough to live on a lake in the summertime with my family. And so I can remember just always being at awe when I went out with my dad fishing at how clear the water was and how beautiful and pristine everything was. So during that time, we were like really enjoying nature as much as we could. Loved playing outside, doing all those great things. And so, and I think society pretty much appreciated nature.
Yeah. So, how did things progress then into the 60s and 70s pertaining to our natural environment?
The 60s and 70s were pretty unique. I guess the thing that pops out in your mind the most is the hippie era.
Yeah.
A lot of this was because of the Vietnam War, which was not a good experience to have lived through. And so society was was pretty much, worried about all the repercussions of the war, but the hippies were the ones that I think had their closest tie with nature. They were like one with nature, the flower children, and so we were concerned about nature a little bit more at that time. I might also add that there was the Cold War period, and that was a time when we worried about our environment as far as pollution from nuclear weapons. And we had bomb shelters. We even practiced hiding under our tables, like that would really do us any good, in case of a nuclear attack. And so we were worried about that fallout. And that you had that the bomb shelters were equipped with water and with oxygen cleansers and all kinds of food, and so that you could live in it for a while. So you were living without nature during that time.
Yeah.
As far as the lake goes, the water quality at Tippy was showing some changes, and so I was able, as a teenager, to work, to volunteer with the DNR. And what we were doing was going into homes and putting dye tablets into the sewer systems to see if the sewer systems were actually leaking into the lake. And we found that a lot of them were, and therefore something had to be done to protect our lakes.
Right.
So we're starting to get into that point where you're really worried about the quality of our environment.
That's interesting. So, what about the 80s through the 90s? What changes did you see during that time?
I'm not sure when plastics really came about, but I think the big issue was plastics, trash, all the excess trash. We were going through a period of time where convenience was the best thing, fast foods and all kinds of stuff, and everything was served in those styrofoam containers, and we just trashed them. You just threw them away, and then the landfills started, getting filled up with stuff that wasn't ever going to go away. Also, so many things were made with plastics, and of course, plastics is fossil fuel. And so the use of fossil fuels and that sort of thing became more prevalent. So we had to start coming up with things to stop that harm to the environment. So recycling and reusing and stuff like that, just to get rid of the trash. We also had a period of tree huggers and endangered species awareness. A
Yeah.
lot of scientists were really emphasizing those problems. And so, you know, there were a lot of activist groups that were actually protesting and doing things back then about that.
Okay, so lastly, how has today's society changed, and how is it different from the past?
I think that I can answer that in one word: politics. I hate to say that, but really, the biggest changes that I see today is the fact that we as people, we as a society, as a united society, are not as worried about the issues of the environment as the politics are telling us that we are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's lots of things that we've been doing, ride shares, the need to cut back on things, try not to use as many fossil fuels. But the biggest issue that I see is this declaration of global warming, which I've got to say, I'm not doubting global warming. I'm just saying that maybe global warming has a lot more to do with nature than it has to do with man. And definitely man does a lot of things to destroy the ozone layer and so forth. But is it something that we should have as a political issue?
Right.
And of course, the other one is the Green New Deal. And we you know, are told to change our eating habits, no steak, because you know what those cows do, and all the jet fuels and all of this, and I can't see that our society as a whole is going to give all that stuff up.
Right.
So anyway, I kind of think that maybe politics has caused a divisiveness. And so therefore, as a society, and our reaction to the environment, to the natural environment, that we've kind of gone maybe a little too far overboard.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're not taking it as seriously as we should.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to say something as a final statement too, if I may.
Yeah,
And
of
that
course.
is, you know, you see a lot on TV, and read about the huge pollution in the inner cities. I can remember as a child going through downtown Indianapolis, and everything was fine. It was pristine. We didn't have trash on the streets. We didn't have litter. And now with the homeless issue, you have needles, you have trash, you have people laying around.
Yep.
You read about the defecation that's right there on the streets, and to me, that is the worst way our society can interact with nature.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Thank you very much for sharing all of that great information.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.